these very same people are the quickest to cry racism at the slightest provocation or for no reason at all.
There's no systemic racism. There is no law. There is nothing that says that I can't do something as a black person that you can do.
We're honoring all of the great white men who are being smeared and defamed and torn down.
Let's consider a few factoids. 53% of East Baton Rouge Parish residents live at or below the federal poverty level. 51% of Louisianans live at or below the federal poverty level. For a single person in the continental United States, the 2022 federal poverty level is $13,590 annually. For each additional person in the household, the poverty level increased by $4,720. So for a household of 4, the poverty level is $27,750. In real terms, this means that unless you run in very select circles, half of your neighbors, co-workers, fellow church members can't make ends meet without some kind of assistance. Theologian Gustavo Gutierrez defines poverty as premature and unjust death. The poor person is someone who's treated as a non-person, someone who's considered insignificant from an economic, political, and cultural point of view. According to author and Princeton sociologist Matthew Desmond, between 2001 and 2014, the richest women in America gained 3 years of life, and the poorest women gained 15 days. So poverty is death. Desmond adds, there was a study that came out very recently that showed that one of the leading causes of death in the United States is poverty. I think that when we deny people access to basic needs and we deny them basic economic security in this rich land, we do deny them life and happiness itself. Desmond has written a new book, Poverty by America, in which he explores not the lives and struggles of people who are poor, but poverty and the conditions that cause it. Desmond contends that the lives the rest of us live are often connected to the conditions that cause poverty. To understand the causes of poverty, we must look beyond the poor. Those of us living lives of privilege and plenty must examine ourselves. Are we the secure, the insured, the housed, the college educated, the protected, the lucky, connected to all this needless suffering? An interview with Desmond appears in the most recent edition of Sojourners magazine. Desmond refutes the idea that cuts in welfare spending are to blame for poverty. There's no evidence that the United States has become stingier over time. In fact, the opposite is true. The problem is that a fair amount of government aid earmarked for the poor never reaches them. Desmond has said the argument that we can't afford to end poverty is sinful. It's flatly dishonest. A study was published a few years ago that showed that if the top 1% of us just paid the taxes they owed, we could raise an additional $175 billion a year, which is just about enough to lift everyone above the official poverty line. And that's just stopping tax evasion. If you pan out and look at our society from some distance, you see a chunk of society living lives of incredible luxury and opulence. 1 in 8 of us owns a second home. We have multiple cars. We have this incredible high standard of living. Often that's powered by government design and the fact that the welfare state is designed to subsidize affluence a lot more than it's designed to fight poverty. The scarcity lie that we tell ourselves is a lie. And when we repeat it, it is a sinful thing to repeat a lie in that way. Desmond goes further. It also is not connected to God's heart for the poor. When you see God getting angry in the Bible, it's often because the poor are being mistreated. Jesus didn't just go into the temple and say, "Oh, money changers, can you excuse me?" He ran them out. When God is wrathful, the wrath is often because people are being exploited and excluded or treated in a racist way. There's something to be said from a faith perspective to react to that scarcity lie with the same kind of righteous anger that we see modeled in the Bible. Desmond argues that we must find ways to have real relationships with the poor, not relationships of service, but real relationships where you're texting, where you're calling, where you're watching football games together, where you're invested in their kids' lives. When we do that, all these abstract debates about poverty and segregation become incredibly concrete and real. I think that we hold ourselves accountable to them like you would be accountable to any friend and person in your community. But it often requires some of us with privilege and means to leave our comfort zone and shop in different places or be in different neighborhoods. But that real relationship, that authentic relationship is really important here. Jesus made a real effort to invite folks from every different position in class structure, including homeless folks, prostitutes, but also tax collectors and exploiters, to be in community with him. That is a calling for us as well. When Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. turned his attention to housing and poverty issues in the urban north of America, he and his family moved into an apartment in the 1500 block of South Hamlin on Chicago's west side. In the image of Ezekiel, whom God sent to the exiles in the wilderness of Babylon, King and his family went and sat where they sat. This is what Desmond thinks should be our practice regarding the poor today. From a sociological perspective, you learn a ton. If you want to know what it's like to get evicted, you can learn a lot by watching folks get evicted. You wouldn't read a travel log about France by someone that's never been to Paris. And I'm proud to be working in that tradition of bearing witness. From a spiritual perspective, I've never experienced the kind of generosity that I've experienced in very poor neighborhoods. There were things about those neighborhoods that are incredibly painful and dangerous sometimes. But I just saw all these acts of incredible generosity and spirit and intelligence in the face of incredible adversity. We deny ourselves something when we choose to cloister away behind our affluence. The conversation about ending poverty in America should also include this bit: the spiritual poverty that's also encasing many affluent communities today. What is Desmond's final word on this matter? I want to end poverty. I don't want to treat it. I want to cure it. I don't want to reduce it. I want to abolish it. I'm asking for us to become poverty abolitionists and to really figure out we're connected to this problem and connected to the solution. That will require some of us who have means to take less from the government. It does ask for that. And it does require those of us who live behind walls and hoard opportunity behind those walls to tear down those walls and stretch for an open, inclusive community. But what we get from those moves is our humanity back. I think churches can lead a moral revival for poverty abolitionism. I would love churches to really speak out against poverty in America and demand an end to it. I think churches can change the common sense in America and help us see poverty as an abomination, as a sin, not something that we have to live with, especially in this land of incredible abundance. What churches can't do is solve poverty on their own. Nothing replaces the state because the state is our full community. There's much more that Desmond has to say about the church and payday lenders, about the lack of media attention focused on the poor, about the need for a total community response to poverty and a total belief that poverty can be eradicated. I suggest that you read the August 2023 edition of Sojourners, paperback or virtual. But for now, let me say that this is something we should pray about. Gracious God, we know that your love is infinite and that you care about all areas of our lives. In these times of historic, systemic economic insecurity, help us to trust that all our security is in you. Keep us mindful that you always have and always will provide for our needs. And keep us mindful that apart from you, we can do nothing. Grant to our leaders the wisdom to guide our communities, our nation, and the world away from the current economic crises. Intercede with divine enablement in those areas of the world that are afflicted. Intercede in those areas dealing with climate change and the economic ravages that accompany it. Intercede in those areas where economic inequity is partnered with racial bigotry. Help us to protect the poor and all those who are struggling during these times. Provide for their needs and give them renewed hope. Open new opportunities for them to furnish the resources they need to live with dignity. Encourage those who have enough to share essential resources with those who lack the necessities of life, and to do so with humble, grateful, loving, and compassionate hearts. We ask this through Jesus, who is our Christ. Amen.